So it's Thursday morning, the 5th of October, and this is my Knowledge Exchange violin update from the end of my time here in Cyprus. I'm sitting in a lovely courtyard behind a Greek language bookshop in the old town in Nicosia, sort of recovering after the concert last night. And as always, when I come to this amazing island, there are so many things to think about. And many things emerged from yesterday's discussions, both with inspired young people in the morning and the radio interview in the middle of the day, the rehearsals with composer Edward Cowie in the afternoon, and performance of Robert Saxton, Biber, Messiaen and Edward Cowie in the evening. So there are a number of themes, of course, and as I mentioned in my previous journal entry, the theme which comes back and re-emerges when I come to Cyprus is the question of how we deal with historical layerings. The layerings of history which we remember and those that we don't. After the concert last night, composer Avis Samoutis and I went along to the exposed remains of two medieval French churches and some houses 5 minutes walk away from the shoe factory on Emu Street where the concert happened, and started to discuss how we could bring the work that we've been doing on a modern approach to the question of the 300 years that Cyprus was French and how we could bring it perhaps to this space. I think the thing which astonished us most last night, was really exciting, was one of the buildings exposed in this archaeological site, which has walkways over it now, was a Byzantine church which had been encased with a larger French church. And the trick with this, which was very interesting, was that they'd taken the apse, which would be familiar from, say, churches which you might have seen in Istanbul, where there was a semicircular apse behind the high altar. And this apse had been, if you like, surrounded by a new, slightly larger bit of architecture, enabling the church to have what you'd be familiar from Romanesque churches from San Antimo all the way to St Bartholomew the Great in London, of an ambulatory behind it. So by enclosing the smaller church in a larger building, the new architectural and religious and cultural expectations of what a church should do, and obviously a larger population, were enabled whilst preserving the original building or aspects of the original building. This was something which we hadn't thought about, and also fitted very interestingly with the work that we're doing, effectively enclosing music and ideas from Lusignan, Cyprus, within modern frames and enclosures, if you like, but enclosures and frames which perhaps give them new life. But probably the main theme of yesterday was the relationship of music to nature. The concert program last night was set off by Robert Saxton's amazing new violin sonata, Reflections in Time, which, if it is about anything, is about, well, I hesitate to say it's about anything, but it's certainly inspired by the many dynamics and shapes and curls that you'd find, for instance, in water, the River Thames, in weather systems, the energies within those. And that became, if you like, a setting, a landscape for the rest of the program, which was explicitly about birds. I used my new version of Biber's Sonata Representativa, which has a nightingale, a cuckoo, a quail, cocks and hens, a very funny cat, a drunk soldier, musketeer called Mars, and rather appropriately for here. What became interesting when we were talking with young students earlier on in the day, and something which perhaps we shouldn't need reminding of, is if you present anything to do with nature and representation and recognition of things in nature, that's very much limited to geography and culture. So we had 4 very bright and informed teenage children from the English school, and none of them had ever heard a cuckoo. And you think how much of classical music is filled with cuckoos. It's something which we thoughtlessly just think, oh, we know what that is. So this speaks to the first kind of aspect of the challenge of the relationship between music and nature and representation, which is perhaps its shallowest point, which is different people recognize different things. So it was helpful that Roderick Chagrick, when he was discussing the Messiaen Catalogue d'Oiseaux during the day, set all of Messiaen's exploration of birds in a context of landscape, and a context of imagination, and a context of storytelling. And in the evening, when we returned to Edward Carey's epic and his masterpiece, Bird Portraits, which we premiered 2 years ago and recorded, and it's always a joy to come back to this 77-minute miracle, Edward spoke movingly about the way we should listen to nature, to the movement of nature, and reminded the audiences that this was something useful for me, that we should listen, if you like, with all of our senses, be aware with all of our senses to nature. I won't attempt to paraphrase what he said, which was very moving to the audience, but he spoke at the end of the obligation that we have, which could never be more pressing than now, the obligation to treasure and respect nature. And he also pointed out that the Great Northern Diver, which appears at the end of his great cycle, what the Midwesterners or Americans will call a loon, its tragic, keening song is in many ways a warning. It wasn't necessary for him to say what the warning is, but I think we all knew. So it'll be very sad for me to leave Cyprus, but now it's time to move on to the next stage.